What is up, winning team? Hello and welcome back. We're continuing with our series Beyond the Veil, the bubble theory and the fourth dimension. If you don't know by now, you should go and just catch up, okay? The whole playlist is linked to the description box. We've been through all the chapters of this book. We are now at chapter 13. So go do your homework, go catch up with the rest of us. But essentially, we are now in chapter 13, the second half. Which is the journey of discovery, where we've started to discuss the concept of a consciousness in the fourth dimension, right? And how free will and all of that plays into it. If this all sounds extreme, that's because you haven't caught up. Let's go catch up, right? Link in the description box with a full series and an introduction video which tells you exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it and what this was all about. A link to the book written by Jamil Chamberlain is also there. You can get it on Amazon for yourself. Go have a look if you'd like to. And finally, there's also an extra link which he sent to me, which is just some more work that he's done like online, essentially, so you can get more of you can literally just go and read the more deeper science of it all. But without further ado, let's continue. So we started out in chapter 13 with the whole concept of redefining reality beyond the observable universe and this introduction of a concept of a consciousness that could be interacting with this S energy field, which the S energy field being the energy field in the fourth dimension, of which all the bubbles have their own S energy signature. Again, if you need to catch up, catch up. So we're going to talk about now the implications for the free will element. I had a lot to say in the previous video about this, so I'm not going to repeat that. We're just going to continue from where we are. So determinism versus free will. The existence of higher dimensions and multiple interacting bubbles. Sorry guys, I'm getting distracted. Introduces complexities to the age-old debate of determinism versus free will. If higher dimensional interactions influence our universe, they could affect the outcomes of events in ways that challenge the notion of free agency. This is interesting. Exactly. Multiple realities and choices. This is actually quite interesting. And I'm going to talk more about some of my thoughts around this. Maybe not through this series, because I want to try and let this series be as scientific as possible. Multiple realities and choices. The bubble theory's framework suggests that the possibility of alternate realities where different choices lead to different outcomes. This multiplicity of bubbles could imply that every decision spawns a new bubble, each representing a different path taken. This concept blurs the lines between fate and free will, presenting a universe where all possibilities coexist. Empowering human agency. Conversely, the awareness of high dimensional influences could empower individuals to exert more control over their lives. Understanding the interplay between bubbles might provide insights into how to navigate or influence higher dimensional dynamics. Enhancing personal agency and decision making. So I'm going to go kind of somewhere a bit wild with what I'm thinking about, right, while I'm reading this. There's a lot of phenomena that happen or people claim to happen that are considered to be the opposite of science, right? So anything spiritual, anything in the realms of spirituality essentially is seen as the opposite of science, right? And we've kind of discussed the fact that, there's a few important, before I actually say my statement, there's a few important things to address here. Number one, science itself has its own areas and ways of addressing the unknown phenomena in things that we might perceive as supernatural, i.e. science fiction, which is very science-based. I've talked about that a lot with you guys, that all the science fiction you see, it is actually all based off of real-life science, right? So if those things are real, why are we not just calling it science? Why are we calling it science fiction? Well, that brings me to the second point I wanted to bring up, based on this work by Sabine Hossenfelder, who is a theoretical particle physicist. Go and find her. I did a little mini 5 videos about her, in this same series, in this same playlist. You'll see in there that she specifically highlighted how so much of particle physics today is a lot of things there's a lack of empirical evidence. So we're calling things certain theories that we believe in, certain accepted facts of science, but there is lacking of the actual empirical evidence, and it's become normalized to accept that we don't really have that empirical evidence. However, the fact of having empirical evidence is supposed to be the first thing that distinguishes between the supernatural and the scientific in the first place, because the whole idea about scientific truth is that it is provable, it is tangible. So she talked about, for example, the reproducibility crisis. I told you guys that if you're a scientist and you publish a paper, the whole point is that people should be able to go look at the same references that you put, do the same methods of what you did, and reproduce the same results under the same conditions. And that's a way that as scientists we can verify. It's like a verification process, right? We verify that what somebody's saying is true. So if it's been proven, and she's saying that a lot of now accepted scientific research is not reproducible, then that means at this point science and the supernatural, this concept of science and the concept of supernatural, the supernatural world in these particular topics are just as trustworthy as each other, is what I'm trying to say. Because science says it doesn't have empirical evidence, and we as humans, and again, I find it fascinating that if you read an article and it's peer reviewed, right? Peer reviewed, somebody else has looked at it and agreed that they believe it's true, then we say that is a verification of scientific evidence. However, if you have a group of people who come together and have all had a particular spiritual experience, because it's not science, it's not under the umbrella of science, that's not accepted, even though one could argue that's also another form of peer review, right? Just saying, just throwing those ideas out there. So I'm setting the tone to get to what I wanted to actually say, which is, what if some of these supernatural experiences could be explained with this kind of type of scientific theory? So hear this. Let's say that we do live in a multiverse of lots of different realities where where it says here, where all possibilities coexist. What if somebody, say, has a vision of, and this would actually be a genius move from God if he did it like this, because this would almost be the perfect way to communicate to us in our understanding, in our dimension, right, in our universe. But anyway, so what if, let's say, I have a dream that it actually always just hitting me now how this all makes perfect sense. But let's say, for example, I'll use a show that I used to watch growing up, right? That's So Raven, right? She would stop and she'd have these visions of something that was going to happen. What if these visions, right, that people are seeing, it's not even just what's going to happen, but it's a reality of what will happen or could happen if nothing else changes, because that is exactly what is actually taking place in an alternate universe. Does that make sense? So as opposed to it being like a vision of you just seeing something that came from nowhere, you're getting a snapshot, right, of something happening in another universe, which actually makes sense because we talked about how there's this 95% dark matter, dark energy, and how a lot of these anomalies, and again, these are some of the other reasons why we have to even talk about this. We don't really fully understand the phenomena of what's happening in things like black holes, etc., etc. Why are the speeds of stars at the center of galaxies moving at the same speed as at the edge of galaxies? When again, according to our current understanding, this is all stuff we've talked about. I've learned in the book. That's not supposed to happen, right? So what if instead of are you having a vision or a dream and you're seeing something that is just being sent to you? What if you're getting a snapshot of this is what happens this is what happens after this happens if nothing else changes? Because I also believe, as a believer of God, right, I believe that when it comes to all the spiritual gifts, whether it's prophecies or dreams or visions, there's a popular belief that people think it's just God just telling you what's going to happen. I don't believe that. I believe he's giving you insight to then make a change as to what's going to come next in the world, if that kind of makes sense. He's giving you some kind of like nudge that, by the way, this again, based on if nothing else changes and everything continues as it is, I'm showing you this because you have the opportunity to change that outcome. But this is the outcome that's going to happen because this is the outcome that's happening in the alternate universe. Because I've been trying to partner this concept of the multiverse and what would be the purpose of having multiple universes in the first place. Obviously, again, if you're just a purely scientific person, you're not going to think about something like that. But to me, as I've said, and as said in the book, and as any good scientist knows, if you're going to actually draw any conclusion, you have to be open to all possibilities. Because again, and that's also something that even Sabine kind of addressed in her work, which you guys, I highly recommend you check it out, because she's currently working as a particle theorist on all this stuff If you guys don't want to disregard me and my opinion, especially because I'm technically a chemist, fine. But go and check out what she had to say, right? So, what was I going to say? Yeah, what was I going to say? Hold on. She was talking in there about how, and this is so important, this is why I recommend you guys watch it. She was talking about how the same social and cognitive biases that exist in normal social interactions are also in the scientific industry. So, social and cognitive biases, right? Let's talk about a few of them. Social biases will be people tend to hang around people that believe the same thing as them. So that's one of the things she pointed out. A lot of the scientists, they already hanging around other scientists who already think like them. That's another limiting factor and limiting variable, because now you're not opening the door to healthy amounts of critique, which is necessary in order for us to, again, produce empirical evidence, right? Empirical support, empirical validation, as it's brought up in this book, right? Similar to how in the book he talks about interdisciplinary collaboration is important. We need all the different areas to come together to think about these concepts, right? For us to forge strong theories, essentially. So there's that. There's the social biases. There's also just the social biases that, as a society, we all have been told that science is always the trustworthy thing and supernatural things are crazy. It's drilled into us since we are children. So, when we learn at school about myths and fables and this, and even me as a believer, people say stuff like the Holy Spirit isn't even real anymore. Even the Christians who so-called believe in supernatural things don't even believe in the supernatural stuff, right? So there's these biases, right, of those types of things. Then there's the cognitive bias. And I'm going to use a phrase that I hear people say all the time that frustrates me. And it's, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's okay if something doesn't make any sense to you, but because it doesn't make any sense to you doesn't make it true. And that's why oftentimes when I'm faced with questions by people or critiques who say, well, how can you prove that this is real? I will throw back the question, how can you prove it's not real? Because until either I've proven it's real or you've proven it's not real, again, we're still at the same level. So instead of being against each other, maybe we bring our thoughts and our concerns together. So you bring your concerns as to why you think it's not real, and that gives me an opportunity to address those. And I bring my thoughts to you about why I think it is real, and that gives you an opportunity to address those. And then we together could draw an overall conclusion, and that's actually going to be more beneficial anyway. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is basically what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm saying hear me out, and then let's come together and figure out what the actual answer is, right? So that's why I just thought was fascinating about this concept of these multiple bubbles, the multiplicity, the free will, and why free will still does seem to play a role in all of this. He goes on to talk about empowering human agency. Conversely, the awareness of higher dimensional influences could empower individuals to exert more control over their lives. Understanding the interplay between bubbles might provide insights into how to navigate or influence higher dimensional dynamics, enhancing personal agency and decision making. I don't even want to go down into the next thing I'm thinking about with this, but I'm just... Representation in literature and art. The bubble theory resonates with themes exposed in literature and art, where alternate realities, parallel universes, and higher dimensional spaces are common motifs. From the multiverse in science fiction to abstract art depicting higher dimensions, cultural expressions reflect our innate curiosity about the unknown and unseen. This is again why I was mentioned the Spider-Verse thing, because again, I'm really curious to see what happens in the third Spider-Verse movies. I probably could just read I don't know if it's in the comics, because this is like a Sony/Marvel thing, and I know it's kind of like off the actual normal Spider-Man comics, just to be clear that I am aware of that. But I'm interested because I'm like, so as I said before, the whole problem is that the whole problem that's happening in the end was that Miguel wants to stop Miles, because Miles is going to probably try to save his father from dying, which having a loved one dying is a canon event that happens in all the multiverses, right? Oh my gosh, I need to really just talk about this as a separate video. We're going to do that. After this, come back, because I really have to unpack all of this, and I don't even know if it's going to be in this series, but it will be on the channel. So let's just get through this, because my thoughts... Anyway, so representation in literature and art, we just did that. Just stay tuned, because I feel like it's especially this part where he says in the book here, right? He says, understanding the interplay between bubbles might provide insights on how to navigate or influence higher dimensional dynamics. I'm going to suggest that there are people who are already aware of this stuff who are trying, similar to Miguel O'Hara, to control this higher dimensional dynamics, because as we know from the Spider-Verse movies, that's exactly what he does. He's the one who gets to decide who gets the watch that helps you to travel between universes. He's the one who gets to control all of that. Who put him in place, especially when he's not even one of the canonical Spider-Men. And I'm going to go with there in that video separately, because I don't want to have to hold back and I don't want these videos to be too long. So philosophical discourse has long grappled with the nature of reality, consciousness, and existence. The bubble theory contributes to this dialogue by providing a scientific framework that aligns with and challenges existing philosophical paradigms, fostering interdisciplinary discussions that bridge science and philosophy. See what I'm saying? I like how he said this. Influence on scientific paradigms. This is why it's actually good for, this is why I believe God created men and women, because if I had written a book like this, I guarantee you that there's not many men that would bother to read it, because I'm sure that I would not appeal to their way of thinking, you know, because this gives written by a man, but it's good. It's good. I'm happy about it. That's what I'm saying. Interdisciplinary collaboration. You know what I'm saying? That's the point. As theories like the bubble theory gain traction, they influence the direction of scientific research and inquiry by proposing high-dimensional interactions as a foundational aspect of reality. I like that. The theory encourages scientists to explore new methodologies, technologies, and conceptual frameworks that transcend traditional bubbles. So that's really important here, what he just said there, right? So as opposed to what we've looked at as the foundation, if we're saying that the foundation exists somewhere else, it actually kind of makes more sense if you kind of think about it, right? Similar to the analogy I would use to explain this would almost be like a plant, right? And this is actually how I describe the spiritual world in general, right? If you have a plant, let's say you have a flower, or you plant a flower or a tree, the foundation of a flower in the ground is there's a seed that's underground, so we can't see it. It then develops its roots so that it, you know, can start to get nutrients and do whatever it needs to do. And then eventually, all of this we can't physically see, but this is the foundations of the flower taking place, right? And then we start to see something sprout, like, you know, we start to see a little sprout and then maybe a little leaf. And before you know it, you have a flower, a tree, or whatever. But the important thing is that foundation, and that foundation tells you so much more of the story than you think it does when you're there looking at a beautiful flower. And I've talked at length on my channel about things I've discovered about trees and how trees, again, interact with each other, in the sense that you could liken it to this concept here of the interlinking bubbles. Did you know, if you didn't know, that trees, their roots also can interlink with each other, which is a question that randomly popped into my head that I did a deep dive into. And those interactions can be beneficial or detrimental to either both or either tree that's taking place, which again is what I'm trying to say. But then again, these are things that are happening in the unseen, underground, amongst the roots, right? These are not what we can see. What we can see is the tree. What all we might see is the tree dying, which again perfectly explains why I think you have to consider these types of concepts, because, and this is what I say to people about the spiritual world, we experience things in life. We don't know where it comes from, because where it comes from is the unseen. So all we see is a tree dying. And it's like, why is this tree all of a sudden dying? And we as scientists are rushing to try and figure out why the tree is dying. What we may not realize, or we may realize after the fact, is if we look in the roots in the ground, the other tree next to it was toxic to that tree. You know what I'm saying? So it's things like, that's exactly how I'm saying this whole thing works. And similar to how we've said in this, that there are evidences that obviously something else is going on more than what we understand. And those evidences point to something else happening. So that's kind of what I'm saying with this, that it's really interesting to bring those thoughts together about these interactions, and the concept that might be foundational. I do believe it is foundational. I believe the fact that we haven't addressed that, and no one's saying that, and science doesn't see it that way, is one of the biggest errors of all of science in and of itself, in my humble personal opinion. Like I said, I'm just a girl who loves science and who loves the Lord. So that's it. And in conclusion, we'll wrap up here. The bubble theory invites us to expand our minds beyond the familiar 3 dimensions, challenging us to envision a universe where higher dimensional interactions influence the very fabric of reality. By redefining our understanding of consciousness, existence, and free will, the theory bridges the gap between scientific inquiry and philosophical exploration. As we continue to delve deeper into the higher dimensions, we open doors to new realms of knowledge and possibilities, reshaping our perception of ourselves and the universe we inhabit. So again, really interesting thoughts there. And I was thinking about this earlier. Like, anyway, we're going to leave it there because I've got so much to say and we'll be here forever. I think we're coming up to the last chapter. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy work. Yeah, oh my gosh, I've got one chapter left. I can't believe it, guys. We're going to have done the whole book. But you guys see where I'm coming from. Like, there's just so much to consider. And like I said, if there's anything in this world that you can observe as to understand why I'm so open to these concepts, it's that if I look around the world, it's so overwhelmingly obvious that we don't know as much as we think we do. Because if we did, how can we have the highest level of technology, supposedly, and be the most intelligent version of ourselves as humans, and yet have so much destruction? As in, people are sick with absolutely everything these days. Everyone's taking multiple medications. We seem to be, our society itself is completely broken. Societally, we've never been more divided than ever. We live in a world where we have access. You can be watching on this video from wherever, and yet people are more lonely than they've ever been before, even though we have access to everything. It's almost as if us and our human thinking and how we reason isn't actually the right answer to how things need to be done, and we just keep digging ourselves into deeper holes. And then as soon as somebody brings an idea to the table that's different from our social and cognitive biases, they look like the crazy person, when it's like, but you could look crazy by continuing, just like she said, Sabine Hossenfelder talked about how they keep doing the same, they have all this money spent doing the same experiments over and over again and getting different results. The world consistently trusts in its own cognitive and social biases, whether it's that thing doesn't make sense or that sounds wild. We can consistently do that. It consistently works against us, and yes, we continue to do it. And that in and of itself is the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. At some point, we have to open our minds even to the things that we thought sounded insane initially, just to do our due diligence to say, at least I opened my mind to that and I questioned it fairly. And so I can be sure. That's why I study everything. I study all religions. I study all areas of science. I study all different thought paths and opinions. I'm ready to hear from everybody, because that strengthens the truths that I know and helps me also when I'm faced with something else. I'm like, okay, I've actually considered that more. Most of the time, I've considered other ideas more than other people who are coming up against me. I've usually considered their idea more than they've bothered to consider mine. And hence why I feel so strongly, because I've done my due diligence. So anyways, you guys, you get the gist. If life's a game, it's pay to win. God bless you all. God loves you. I love you. Don't forget, all the links are in the description box. Grab the book, check out the playlist of all the videos are going to be in there. And of course, the other link where you can just go onto the internet basically, and he's got like a page where you can read more in depth into all these types of stuff. And yeah, we've got one more chapter to go, and I am going to do this video about Miguel O'Hara and the multiverse because I have a lot to say about that. Anyways, if life's a game, it's fate to win. God bless you. God loves you. I love you. I'll see you in the next one.